When you watch a commercial for the Marines, it's very clean cut. It's someone snapping a sword up next to them, and the few the proud, and very morale driven and patriotic. And the reality is, there's that underside of it, and there's the reality. There's what the Marine Corps is. It's a fighting force, and our job is to go in and kill people, essentially. We're trying to kill our way out of a problem. That's what the Marine Corps was developed for. We're a fighting force. Go in, hit it hard, and get out and let the Army deal with it. And that was a lot of it, was just, okay, we're gonna go in first, we're gonna clear this area, and then it's on to the next one.
Did you believe, or did you feel that you were adequately trained?
Trained as far as, yes, I was trained to shoot straight and hit a target, and I was trained on radio communication and etiquette in the center of operations, or how to conduct an appropriate patrol, set up a patrol base, write an op order, and execute a mission. But as far as going to a different country and interacting with the local populace and talking about different issues with them, definitely not. Not only were you trying to react the way we were trained to react, which is you escalate a situation, somebody shooting at you, we're gonna come back tenfold on you, to now acting as the police force. Okay, these two locals are having issues with each other, and they're two conflicting tribes, and maybe they get into a conflict where they shoot at each other a couple of times, but the Americans are seen on this side, it's gonna cause problems with this tribe. It was just a mess. You're just coming into a situation with absolutely no context and trying to figure out how to help them live their lives, which was insane. It's insane. The Taliban, or the locals that were there to fight us, knew that they weren't going to get into a significant firefight with the United States Marine Corps. It's just, they were going to lose. So their way of basically accruing casualties with us was to either hit us from a distance or to set up IEDs. And it was too easy. Why wouldn't they do it like that? They knew the area. I remember when we first went in, when we first rolled across that first field, was really where we saw the most as far as defense being put up by the insurgents. So that's where we took the initial brunt of it. RPGs, IEDs, small arms fire, and I remember seeing. I had a little squad with me, and there were about 15 of us, and all of us remember seeing this one guy behind a barrel, like this 5-gallon barrel, or 50-gallon barrel, and shooting at us. And so you have 15 people, looking down their sights, shooting at this guy, and we thought, wow, this is gonna be pretty easy. This is kind of like a video game. It's kind of weird. And that was probably the last time for a whole 9-month deployment where I actually saw somebody shooting at me. There was a very clear picture that this is a person who's shooting at you. That's the person that we need to shoot. And hey, easy day. End of the story there.
What was it like the rest of the time?
The rest of the time you're chasing ghosts. It's the local populace. It's the people that's there. They would chisel out holes in their mud huts, and if they saw Marines walking by, shoot a couple of rounds, hide their weapons. And this was every day. Every day of that deployment was a firefight. And they knew what they were doing. They didn't want to significantly engage with us. They wanted to take a couple of shots, sort of suck us in a little bit, maybe then detonate an IED, or they would just come up with new ways to injure us and to kill us. There were a few moments in my deployment where that sort of like the proverbial light bulb started to blink. And I remember like very clearly like one situation where I was out with a squad and we were just talking to the locals, walking around with our Afghan army counterparts, showing that presence, within the community. And we're in the middle of this field, and we started taking fire from not the first tree line, but we're in this field. There's a tree line, then there was another field and a tree line after that, and they were firing at us from that tree line, that far one. And what I could notice in between, in the next field over, was a farmer just kind of standing there. And he was standing between, the group of Marines and the group firing at us. And I had my interpreter with us, Maddie, and I talked to the squad leader, and I said, "Hey, we gotta bound up to that guy. We gotta see, what the fuck is he doing there? Why is he in this field? Is he spotting for them? Is he telling, we would get that a lot too. Someone would just be on the lookout, watching the Marines, where they're going, positions, calling into the fighters, and it would just be an easier ambush. So I felt like that was what this guy was doing. I'm like, all right, this guy's dirty. He's probably spotting for them. Let's go up and talk to him, see what he's doing. So we're bounding up, you're dodging bullets. We finally make our way up to him, and he's like, kind of got this weird look on his face. He's smiling, and his eyes are kind of saggy. And I said, Maddie, ask this guy what he's doing here. I want to know why he's in this field right now, and where's his weapon, essentially, because he's spotting. And Maddie talked to him, and he said a couple of things, he answered, and he was smiling. And Maddie turned back to me, and I just remember him saying, "Sir, he is high." And I remember thinking, like, what? Like, what the fuck? Like so now I have a squad of Marines with me. There's 15 of us, and I just risked all their lives so I could ask this heroin addict why he is in the middle of this field while bullets are flying by him. And that was just the reality of the situation. Like, this guy was stuck in Afghanistan, digging holes in fields while a distant country is, sending its military here to shoot at other people who live in your country. It was just a crazy situation, and I remember that sort of being the turning point, like, for me. Like, that really solidified my view on this war, which was, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? And why am I risking my life and the lives of my men to fix a situation that isn't broken for America, at least. It just seems strange, with all the problems that we have back home, to go risk our lives for people like this.
My first tour, it was still pretty new. They'd only been being trained for 3 years. But by my second tour, they had been being trained for about 5 years. And, one thing I kind of thought, and other people thought, is that, there's some of them that are dedicated and, willing to fight. But there's just not enough. And the vast majority, you can throw all the money and all the training and all the equipment at a group of people that you want. And you can train them for as long as you want. But if their hearts aren't really in it, it's not going to work. And I think I saw that with the Iraqi army. We saw that going out on patrols with them, where they would, fire their weapons accidentally, indiscriminately, how they, broke down. There were a couple events where we would get, hit with mortars, and they would become what we call combat ineffective, which means that instead of taking care of their buddies and patching them up and getting everybody on the helicopters, they would just lay down on the ground and, cry. And seeing that was really, concerning. Couldn't walk in a file. I mean, again, these are basic skills that most of us are expected to learn in, our basic and our infantry training. And then soon after we deploy, it was difficult for them. And then, my second deployment, having their pay embezzled by the local sheikh for 6 months, and then we find out about it later. These are just kind of part and parcel. So I think none of us were particularly confident about it, and that's putting it kind of charitably.
Confident about what?
Confident about their ability to take over. I remember my my second tour in 2008. It was 2008 at this point, and we were at a little joint patrol base with them, and they were cleaning their M16s with like diesel fuel, with JP8, which is not the right stuff to use for that. In fact, it can be bad for them. And having to explain that to them, and then noticing that they didn't really know how to put their weapons back together, really fast, or how to hold them. And I just thought, well, it's been 5 or 6 years. Why is this happening? It's not because we didn't try. It's because you can't make a group of people really care, really have their hearts in it, just by throwing the money or the training at them or whatever. This was a mission that basically most people knew, my chain of command knew, at least up to the battalion level, that it was an operation primarily to give the officers something to do and primarily to do a show of force, but it really did not have a serious military purpose or necessity. So on paper, what it meant was that we were going to go in force into a very isolated kind of desert area, a rural area that was outside of our area of operations. And our mission was to protect another unit that was far north of us who was building a patrol base. And the way that it was presented to us was basically that we were going to protect their southern flank so that if any infiltrating insurgents or if any infiltrating Al-Qaeda wanted to kind of attack or harass them building that patrol base, that we would block them. And we had a bunch of reporters with us as well, and it was this huge production. And once we got out there, we realized that it was a totally desolate desert area, and the dangers from unexploded ordnance from the first Gulf War in 2003 just buried in the sand was probably more to us than any insurgents. And you could see for 40 miles in every direction, and there was no way that any insurgents that even wanted to attack that base were going to go through us or we're going to be able to see them. Going out there, our unit hit a couple of IEDs that have been out there for a long time. We don't know how long they've been out there, but they certainly weren't planted in advance of us coming out there. And guys are okay. Some of the reporters hit IEDs, and that was their story, and the other trucks hit IEDs for some of the soldiers we were with, some of the younger ones. It was their first experience of that, so they kind of, were brought to the reality of it. But when we were out there, different people did different patrols. Again, none of our units encountered any insurgents. And, I think you could get the officers talking about it candidly. Again, it was just something where, a battalion officer gets to make a giant PowerPoint and says why this is happening and blah, blah, blah. And it goes into the statistics book or whatever, and it gets chalked up as a successful mission, but it's, a solution in search of a problem type of thing. If we hadn't gone there, at least based on my understanding of it, there's no chance that this company setting up a patrol base, which was way to our north, would have been overwhelmed or anything like that. On the way out, a guy that I'd served with on the first tour that was in our platoon, I was the captain's radio guy at this point. On the way out, we were breaking down the antenna at the command post and everything, and the platoons were filing out. They were maybe a kilometer away from us, probably less. Their vehicle hit an IED that had been there on the way out, leaving. And it hit in the back left, and we could kind of see it happen. And then, we heard the radio traffic, and this guy lost both his legs from the IED. And my old, my captain who I was with was just like apologizing to the platoon sergeant who I had also been with, and they were just saying, what can okay, that is what it is. What are you going to do? And I remember when we got back, one of the NCOs in the headquarters platoon that I was in at the time told me, go clean up. Somebody's got to do this. You got to go clean up the Humvee where all the blood and bone and everything was. And because he was like, look, you can't make one of the younger guys do it. Can you do it? And I should have done it. I'm kind of ashamed of it. I just couldn't do it. I felt like that I couldn't handle it because I knew Leon really well. And I think at that point we didn't know if he was gonna make it or not because he had gotten medevac. We called him the medevac for him, and I just realized that I couldn't go up and do it. And I think a crew of some other guys ended up doing it, something like that. Yeah, and basically an operation to go and not see anybody. And dodge our own unexploded ordnance and IEDs that had been there since the initial invasion 5 or 6 years earlier. And speaking candidly with, some of the officers and NCOs involved, I mean, people would admit it they would agree with me to my face that it was not for anything that people got, really badly hurt. Thank God nobody got killed. For what? Nobody could seem to explain that. This is just common over there where, the indiscriminate stuff happens and, the villagers kind of get hit. We responded to what they call a catastrophic one time, which is an IED had hit a vehicle going down one of the roads in our area. And then the response to that, the wrecker vehicle and the recovery vehicle, the insurgents know how this works. So they wait for the rescue team to come in and get out, and then they blow that up. And so it like incinerated 2 vehicles, and there were body parts all over on both sides of the road, and it took, we responded to it, and it took the platoon, a couple of platoons, most of the night just to, you go and you collect everything. You collect all the equipment and all the body parts, and, because you want to collect as many remains as you can, and you also want to collect any sensitive equipment so that they don't get it, that survived. And I was in the turret most of the time, and it was dawn and dusk, so I couldn't see a lot of it, but I remember seeing my buddy, off in the distance carrying just a torso. They mostly fired smaller mortars, not the huge ones. So these are, I think they're 62 or 61 millimeter mortars that, they have to land pretty close to do some serious damage. And, they fired them so often for the first few months, we started to, make fun of them because if we were patrolling out of the trucks and we heard them, they started to fire, and we got inside the armored Humvees, unless it was a direct hit through the turret, even if it was just outside, the armor was going to stop. So we took it seriously, but we weren't too, we certainly weren't as scared of them as we should have been. And then, one day they landed 2 of them in this courtyard that we were all in the patrol base. And it just took out like 20 guys. It was a miracle that nobody died. A couple people came close, I think, but they stopped the bleeding. But for most of us, we were walking wounded. So we were just, peppered in different areas, and we had to go to the hospital. But we weren't like at risk of dying from it. But that was kind of the time. I think after that, everybody was extremely gun shy around them and their attitude, and even just hearing they call it a poo when it goes out of the tube, it sounds like that. Everybody was kind of a lot more scared of them after that, I would say.
Is that when Barnes got hurt?
Yeah. So he was the guy next to me. He was our radio guy, and we had just taken this new patrol base, which was like a Sheikh's mansion, and we'd just taken it after this operation to take back this town. And we were going out there. It was our platoon's turn to go to that base and operate out of that base. And we rolled into this courtyard, and everyone was kind of lollygagging getting inside. And my squad leader was like, he was the first one to hear it before anybody else. He said, "Did you guys hear that?" And everybody stopped. And, I thought I'd heard something, but I wasn't sure. And then the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I think I got knocked unconscious for a few seconds because the concussive blast kind of blew everybody down. And then I landed on top of this guy, Barnes, who was the radio guy for our platoon. And he had taken shrapnel from the mortar up into his forehead, and the helmet he was wearing, it actually served as like a ricochet, and so it did a ton of damage to his like skull and his part of his brain, and he had a really long like surgery and rehab for many years, and has had a lot of issues since then. So
How is it that he had so much damage, but you landed on top of him and you didn't?
you know, some guys would say that that's just divine intervention, or just, you know, what's meant to be or what's not. I came to look at it, like some others, as just the cold, hard reality of the chance of it, just zeros and ones. I mean, it's just it's just basically a mathematical equation of the trajectory of the mortar and the trajectory of the, you know, where someone's standing. And I mean, that's all it is. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And I think, you know, thinking about, they say thinking about it too long will, you know, make you go insane. So you try not to think about it, because like I said, I mean, a step to the left, a step to the right. And that's how it's been for, you know, from the history of wars, I think. So, you know, it's something thinking about that's just, you know, difficult to think about, because like I said, you can go into kind of this dark spiral of trying to understand why that is. And there were plenty other instances of that as well. But I came to think about it as just an impersonal, just like total randomness, that kind of thing. So
divorces. I had guys who had, you know, their bank accounts emptied while they were deployed. You know, you're spending 9 months in a mud hut getting shot at, and coming home to an empty bank account and or an empty house. I remember one gunny just like, I remember how upset he was because, you know, his wife had left him, but she had taken the dogs. You know, he loved these dogs, and I just remember like just how upset he was. You know, that she took the dogs. And just that sort of feeling of, which you feel a lot as a veteran, of sort of being alone in this. You know, I'm going through these issues. Who can relate to what I'm going through right now? So money issues, domestic violence issues, a lot of like road rage issues, fist fights, and it made sense. You know, we train folks how to fight, how to be hard, but we don't train them, you know, what happens when you get home and you have to then transition into civilian life, and you know, how to just calm yourself and your anxiety in those situations. And you know, a lot of times you think, okay, well, I just got done getting shot at for 9 months, so me waiting in line while the person at Dunkin' Donuts figures out how to work the cash register is not a huge issue for me. I think I can, you know, I'll be able to deal with this. And but the reality is it's the opposite a lot of times, that those little things are sometimes things that can set you off, and that just goes with the escalation of force that goes with being a Marine. You know, a little bit of aggression shown towards you, you know, you're going to come back, you know, tenfold on that. You know, but I feel like I had a few of those situations happen before you realize, and at least my mother wasn't shy about it at that time. She had another son who was in the Navy, and while I was deployed in Afghanistan, he was in Iraq. So she was, you know, hanging a you know, flag with 2 stars on it outside of her door for a year, and she knew what to expect when we came home, because you know, my father was a Vietnam veteran too. So you'd see, I'm sure she saw what was happening, and the issues that come along with, you know, people returning home from war zones. And she wasn't shy about it, and she, you know, had talked to me about getting my anger sort of under check and talking to someone. And you know, luckily I did, you know, and start reading and you start learning about it. And I was just lucky enough to be able to sort my own deployment out, sort those issues out.